His name is Zeta. He's kind, gentle, and also a top-secret military weapon. But he's made a decision.
I will not destroy anymore.
Now, with the whole world chasing him,
Please help.
he's on the run with his only friend.
I'm equipped with a built-in credit card. I can generate as much money as I need.
You are so taking me shopping.
The Zeta Project.
While Superman preceded Batman in the realm of television, animation, video games, comic books, and even feature films, if you count the Adam West movie more so as an extension of his TV show than its own entity, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who thought the Big Blue Boy Scout held more importance in shaping the modern era of DC comics and adaptations than his dark and brooding counterpart. While there are many factors that can be seen as contributing to this perception, we can probably all agree that Batman the Animated Series played a large role in shaping public opinion. Breaking onto the scene in September of 1992, Batman the Animated Series instantaneously became a cultural juggernaut, with many of its crew members, from directors to composers and even voice talent, still working to bring the characters of DC Comics to life on the big and small screen. By this point in time, the story of BTAS is so well documented throughout books, interviews, and entire documentaries that I could probably tell you a random factoid about the show's production and you'd go, oh yeah, I knew that. Like, did you know Tim Curry was originally going to be the Joker before Mark Hamill was ultimately cast in the role? Don't be shy, answer this question in the comment box.
You killed Captain Clown. You killed Captain Clown!
But Batman the Animated Series isn't the show we're covering today. You see, over the years following the end of BTAS in 1995, the show found a way to keep its hold in the zeitgeist via the ever-expanding, multi-connected web of shows that eventually became known by fans as the DCAU, or DC Animated Universe. Or, I guess, technically Detective Comics Animated Universe, but nobody calls it that. Please, don't call it that. Following Batman the Animated Series' conclusion, the crew from that show got busy working on a new cartoon, a super cartoon if you will. And in September of 1996, Superman the Animated Series was born. This show would bring many new faces to the DCAU, both on screen and behind the scenes. None more important to our story today than writer Bob Goodman, but we'll get to him in a bit. While the show paid tribute to the crew's history with Batman as early as its 3-part premiere,
still, it wouldn't be bad if people knew a little more about Superman. I don't want anyone thinking you're like that nut in Gotham City.
It wasn't until October 1997 when the two finally met, solidifying the shared universe during World's Finest, a 3-part crossover event which served to raise awareness that a continuation of Batman the Animated Series began airing the month prior in the form of The New Batman Adventures. Despite the show's popularity, after only a year, the network canceled TNBA and wanted the crew to focus on pitches for a new show revolving around a teenage Batman, in hopes that the audience would skew younger.
So I said, so if there was some way that we could come up with a teenage Batman show that was still in continuity, that still built off of the shows that we'd already done, that was the only way to really do that is to go forward into the future and introduce a new character, some Batman.
And now that we had Batman Beyond, we were one step closer to meeting our beloved fish out of water synthoid.
Don't move, Zeta.
Okay, well, not really out of water. While I'm sure you could name a few down under in the Australia box, it's not incredibly often that spin-off shows receive their own spin-offs. And perhaps for that reason alone, Infiltration Unit Zeta's first ever appearance in Batman Beyond Season 2 episode Zeta has often been considered a backdoor pilot by fans, suggesting that the spin-off series was already in planning stages, but needed to piggyback off a popular pre-existing show in order to justify its own existence. Perhaps surprisingly, this notion couldn't be further from the truth.
The original episode, Zeta, there was no discussion at the time of doing anything afterward. It was a standalone episode.
Born out of Alan Burnett's desire to see a Batman Beyond episode where he fought a robot, the concept was handed off to that Superman writer we just mentioned, Bob Goodman, following a conversation that Bob and Alan had regarding a movie idea Bob had been formulating about a man keeping a hostage in his basement. Wait. By this point, Bob had become a DCAU mainstay with multiple fan favorite episodes on his resume, such as Nighttime, Legends of the Dark Knight, Growing Pains, and now, with Batman Beyond Season 1 finale Ascension under his belt,
Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
Alan was able to rest assured that his pitch was in good hands.
I never actually got very far into that movie idea, but I was talking to Alan Burnett about it, and he had thought it might be an interesting thing on Batman Beyond to do a story about a killer robot that holds somebody hostage in a basement while he's doing whatever he's doing.
In the planning stages, Bob flipped this idea, turning the infiltration unit into a good guy as an homage to his love of classic monster movies such as Frankenstein, and in an attempt to keep with the themes of humanity being more monstrous than the monsters of those stories, the original outline for Zeta called for the titular robot to be destroyed by the end of the episode. Of course, any fan of the DCAU knows that idea was ultimately axed, and Zeta got away in the end, thanks in part to input from Burnett and other staff writers, along with pressure from Kids WB for Batman Beyond to start including more happy endings. Kids WB's push for bringing a lighter tone to Batman Beyond didn't stop there, and network demands called for more stories to be set in the daytime and in the high school setting, leading to Zeta impersonating one of Terry's teachers. But as these mandates came down, tragedy struck.
The investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous. The two gunmen who went on the rampage booby-trapped the building and even themselves. Authorities have also revised the death toll, now saying 15 people were killed, including the two gunmen.
Columbine happened while I was writing the original Zeta episode, literally while I was home writing the script, and I suddenly had to change gears in the direction that episode went. We were getting so much push from the network back then to put all the action in the school, have this be like, we want the show to take place in the high school, and I went home and wrote this great action sequence of Agent Bennett at a high school, and then Columbine happens and my phone rings like, get the action out of the high school.
Despite these conditions, in Bob's hands, the story went from Burnett's Batman fights a robot concept and turned into a dark and mature tale that set out to ask questions about government overreach, the surveillance state, the death penalty, and who is deserving of not just trust, but also basic human decency. Themes that would all carry forward in the character's future.
It took a little bit of convincing, but I decided to let the robot live at the end of the episode, wrote it that way, and good that I did, because we ended up launching a whole series off it.
Once the script was done, audio had been recorded, and the episode was finally in pre-production, Goodman realized that the door was now open to expand Zeta's story and give him a series of his own. He pitched the idea to Alan Burnett at the Daytime Emmys after a few martinis. Martinis! To which Alan responded, "Sounds great. Mention it to Linda Steiner," who was Kids WB's senior vice president of creative affairs at the time. So Bob found Linda at the award shows, passed the idea to her, and she requested he bring a pitch to her office the following week.
It was the best pitch meeting of my life. I think a sentence into it, she stopped and she said, "Stop, sold, I get it, let's go to the network."
My name is Zeta. I'm a U.S. government infiltration unit designed to replace and destroy targeted individuals.
Destroy?
But I don't want to destroy anymore.
In line with the rest of the DCAU shows before it, the production crew hoped that the Zeta concept would appeal to more than just an audience of children and hopefully pull in adults as well. Bob Goodman is even on the record as having planned it to be darker than Batman Beyond and consistently compared it to the 1960s TV show The Fugitive, with Bob having binged as many episodes of the series as he could on video while developing the Zeta Project. He even kept a copy of the book The Fugitive Recaptured on his desk for the entire run of the show. Though for the millennial and younger viewers in our audience, you may be more familiar with the 1993 Harrison Ford film based on the series rather than the series itself. As he told us via email, Bob looked to the 60s series as his guide on big structural questions. Like, for example, how frequently we should see Agent Bennett or Dr. Selig, Bennett being the obvious equivalent to Lieutenant Gerard, and Selig being the one-armed man, the person who can prove Zeta's innocence. And while writing the show, we regularly looked to the 60s series for story inspiration. For example, he elaborated that the episode Quality Time, an episode we've mentioned in multiple timeline videos, had had its structure of both sides must work together once the protagonist is in peril with the antagonist child, lifted directly from The Fugitive's episode Nemesis, featuring then-child actor Kurt Russell. Whereas The Wrong Morph, an episode in which Zeta transforms into a wheelchair-bound child and accidentally implicates him in a crime he didn't commit, drew from another Fugitive episode, whose name seems to escape us both. But if you figure it out there, feel free to drop it in the comments. That's my third call for comments. Everybody, please comment. Unfortunately, when Bob and Linda took the pitch to the network, they quickly realized that the tone they wanted wouldn't end up selling the show.
We were pitching 2 projects to them at that point. I was pitching a Legion of Superheroes show, sort of as a 90210 kind of superhero thing, but they were worried that it was going to continue to skew too old. They were all about like what their demographics were. So they chose Zeta Project and figured, well, you know, it's a robot and it's a teenage girl, and how much fun can that be? We had the edict that none of the episodes could take place at night. It all had to be bright and cheerful and all of that. Bob had all these stories that he wanted to tell that were like warnings about the misuse of technology and dark government and stuff like that. And it was like, well, how do you fit these things together?
In 2001, Kids WB underwent a corporate regime change, with previous network heads, Gene McCurdy, along with other studio execs, being replaced with a newly created dedicated team of network execs. This meant that the studio and network now had a more distant relationship, with the network now acting more like a customer that the studio had to sell to. And with that shakeup, all the shows on Kids WB were now under similar edicts to those passed down to the Batman Beyond team. The network wanted to keep the 6 to 11-year-old market at the forefront, and that meant the hopes of making a darker and more serious show than Beyond were now out the window.
One of the promises that we made to Kids WB was that most of the locations that Zeta was going to encounter weren't going to be as dark and gothic and, you know, sort of oppressive feeling as Gotham City.
In keeping with this tone, the network insisted the Zeta Project put a comedy producer on the show, which led to a team from previous Warner Bros. Comedies such as Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs being assigned to the the project, under the supervision of Liz Holzman, a move that would lead to a difficult learning curve when it came to tasks such as staging action to be suspenseful and storyboarding. Though, as a compromise, Bob was able to handpick Kurt Gaeta, a director he worked with previously on other DCAU shows, to direct the pilot. Ultimately, Kurt ended up directing several episodes of the show going forward.
Bob had a lot of things on his mind when he was working on it. He had a lot of things he wanted to say, and this was his vehicle for saying it. It was very difficult to try and get those messages across within the constraints of what Kids WB wanted at that point. I'm not dissing the show because I think that we did some really, really good things on it. I think that it's much better than people tend to remember it being, but they're comparing it to the rest of the DCAU, and it's a different animal.
Over time, all of those hurdles began to add up and understandably left members of the crew frustrated, with some, such as Ovi Nedelcu, now known for his work on films such as Paranorman, Kubo and the Two Strings and Space Jam: A New Legacy, publicly stating in interviews that they felt handcuffed creatively. But despite the hardships, on January 27th, 2001, Kids WB aired the first episode of the Zeta Project.
I only had time to download a partial file and this image. Both were damaged in the electric surge. It'll take a while to reconstruct the data.
But look at that picture, Z. One of those guys is gonna get you your freedom. I know it.
What began as a conceptually dark thriller was now a bright and vibrant kids cartoon that took our fish out of water robot protagonist. Why do I keep using this term? It doesn't make sense. This show has so much water. Was now a bright and vibrant kids cartoon that took our misfit robot protagonist and his spunky teenage girl sidekick on a road trip searching for Zeta's freedom and Rose's long-lost family. The Zeta Project saw Office Space's Diedrich Bader replace Gary Cole as the lovable synthoid Zeta.
I was created for one purpose, to destroy. I do not wish to destroy anymore.
If you could just go ahead and make sure you do that from now on, that would be great.
I think if I were a millionaire, I could hook that up too, because chicks dig dudes with money.
I'm equipped with a built-in cred card. I can generate as much money as I need.
You know, maybe I can help.
with Beverly Hills 90210 regular Julie Nathanson lending her voice to Z's comrade Rosalie Rowan, as well as a supporting cast which included that 70s show's Kurtwood Smith as the stern, no funny business Agent Bennett.
Oh, is that why the guy in the courtroom's name was Kurt? Oh my god.
Rising star Michael Rosenbaum, whose biggest claim to fame at the time were films Sweet November and Urban Legend, as the clumsy Agent West, and Lauren Tom of Friends and Futurama fame, voicing the level-headed Agent Lee.
Just doing my job, sir.
Your job is to retrieve that synthoid.
While the final product was noticeably aimed towards a younger audience, this didn't stop the team behind it from covering mature subject matter, including, but not limited to, abuse in the foster care system, systemic issues in law enforcement, capitalist exploitation of labor, and even subtle hints at times that Zeta's search for self-discovery holds parallels to the queer experience.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
Are you a robot too?
Please. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
By sticking to their guns and covering these topics in a way that would more easily relate to a 6 to 11-year-old audience, the Zeta Project became a special outlier from the rest of the DCAU, and to this day sits among its beloved sister shows as a more obscure cult classic. Sadly, the network remained afraid that the Zeta Project was too dark, heavy, and adult all throughout its run, and exactly 1 month after the first season's finale aired, it seemed as though Kids WB's fears were substantiated.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Only now, hours later, under the harsh lights of rescue vehicles, is the true, horrifying breadth of the terror becoming clear. Before it is over, the casualty figures will be numbing, and few in the city will be untouched by what happened today. So often in the past, we've been able to say, it could have been worse. Tonight, this time, it's hard to imagine how.
Because Bob was passionate in tackling the topic of law enforcement's shortcomings, the main antagonists of the Zeta Project were a group of agents from the NSA, a real-world law enforcement agency that was now hard to criticize without courting controversy due to the role they took on during the early 2000s War on Terror. Add to this that the reason the NSA didn't trust Zeta to be the peaceful robot he continually insisted in the first place was because he defected while he was undercover infiltrating a terrorist group. Kids WB grew more and more uneasy about their new show.
Right after 9/11, I mean, they considered canceling the show right then and there.
Luckily, this didn't come to pass, but the show was clearly on thinner ice than ever, and by the end of season 2, the powers that be insisted that if they wanted to be picked up for a third season, the finale required a cliffhanger. Despite surrendering to the network's demands, this wasn't enough to calm the waters, and the Zeta Project was hung out to dry without ever finding proper resolution.
He's gone, Ro. Now no one will ever believe me.
Don't worry, Z. We'll find a way.
Okay, seriously, why is there so much water? They fight water in like half of these episodes!
Maddie, please, come on. It's the end of the video. You only have this paragraph left.
Water! Everywhere! Just water! There's so much water!
Okay, allow me. Despite surrendering to the network's demands, this wasn't enough to calm the waters, and the Zeta Project was hung out to dry without ever finding proper resolution. Bob Goodman was left at his wit's end after years of the network pushing to make the show something he never intended it to be. And as a result, rather than moving forward on a third season that wouldn't fit his vision, he quit.
It is just so sad.
Pull yourself together, Jake. I honestly do not know why I keep you around. Such a disgrace to our cause.
Okay, Maddie just discussed everything there is to know about the show. That should be good enough to change the course of history. Let's get going, Maddie. This was fun.
Not quite. You see, there's a bit of a list.
Oh, Zeta Month. Hell yeah! I'm gonna need another martini.
Hey, this is Julie Nathanson, Ro, from Zeta Project. It might be a good idea for you to subscribe to Watchtower Database.
Do you want to see the Zeta Project come back for more episodes and get a proper conclusion? Or maybe you just have fond memories of the show from when you were a kid? Send us your Zeta Project positivity by sharing a 30 to 60 second selfie video on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok with the hashtag #BringBackZeta, now through November 27th, for a chance to be featured in the Zeta Month finale. Go! Go!